first become aware of Stalin?
Well, obviously, I mean, he was one of the worst tyrants ever to, I mean, you could not be aware of him because he was, you know, from about 1917 to 1953, I think it was when he died. He was just, I mean, the worst sociopath, psychopath, murderer in the world. I mean, I don't think there has been anyone worse than him. So I was asked to read part after doing a reading of something else, and the guy came up to me, who was the writer, and said, "Would you like to read this next week?" And I didn't know what I was playing, and eventually I ended up playing Stalin, and it kind of stuck. And they said, "Right, well, would you like to do the play?" So we did the play, and it sold out completely 4 days before we were due to open, which is kind of unheard of. So no one could get any tickets. And then it got really, really good reviews, and this was at the Gatehouse in Highgate. Now we've been asked to come back by popular demand, so it's really exciting to do that. And I feel quite, rather the word privileged. I'm not sure if you should use a word like that for Stalin, but it's a big role to take on, and it's a wonderful cast. They are quite brilliant. In fact, I'll give you a little potted description of the play. It is Vodka with Stalin tells the true story of Rose Cohen, journalist, suffragette, and international agent for the Moscow-based Communist International in the 1920s. In 1930, she and her Russian lover, Max Petrovsky, settled in Moscow, and she had a baby, just in time to be caught up in Stalin's murderous purges. As a foreigner and a Jew, she was naturally suspected of being in league with Trotsky, who obviously, as you know, got a nice pick, in the words of the Stranglers. You know that he got murdered by a Jew sent by Stalin. Her former lover, Harry Pollitt, now Britain's communist leader, pleaded for her life with his great drinking companion and friend, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. And the play spans the years 1917 to 1956.
Oh, wow.
So that's a sort of potted history of the play, but it's got a brilliant cast. The two leads are phenomenal. And the rest ain't bad either. So no, it's a privilege to be part of a very good cast, and Owain is a great director. He's used the space at Highgate very well, and I really think it's got potential, this one, especially in these times. It's interesting playing the part of Stalin because it's quite challenging, because mentally challenging. I think that's the thing. I think, I think when you're playing an absolute tyrant, I remember finishing the show and feeling off for about 2 days and couldn't quite work out why. And I think that might have been because the after effects of playing him, which is very dark. It's a very dark energy, and you need to have these energies controlled, because otherwise you can. And I think this is, a problem in our industry, in a way, that we don't have a way of sometimes getting out of a role. So you can. I mean, to all intents and purposes, I finish and I sort of say that's it, good. But this stuff lingers. It's kind of hard to sort of just shake it off and go, there we go, that's Stalin, he's gone.
Yeah.
No, he's a mass murderer. You've got to really look at that, and that's something I think this industry perhaps needs to look more at. If you're playing very dark roles, there has to be some way of getting out of that, and I don't think some people I think there's been a lot of problems with that in this industry.
So do you think it's very much like method acting?
I don't believe in method acting. I think if you go into that way, you're going to have real psychological damage. Because if you're starting to get too deep into the role and rolling around like playing a tramp and sleeping rough on streets for 3 weeks, you're doing intolerable damage to your head. I think just do what you do it well, research it, and go with your gut. I always trusted my gut. That's the way I work.
And I know you mentioned earlier on that tickets were going quite fast when it started. So,
well, they completely sold out 4 days before. I mean, when we got in that night, we heard that every single performance had sold out. No one could get a ticket for Love and Money, which is almost unheard of. It was extraordinary. I think maybe because it was originally called Harry and Rose, and then they changed it to Vodka with Stalin, and I think they're putting the name Stalin in, sort of, sold the show, But I suppose that's the tricky thing as well, because everybody else is unknown. It doesn't matter who you could do anything with your voice, with your characterization. You can do any of those things, but you can do anything you want. But with Stalin, we all know who he was, so people are expecting something when they come. They're expecting to see, oh, well, how's he going to play that part? How's he going to play one of the worst dictators ever in the world? But how is he going to do that? So yeah.
So you think the response has been good so far, then?
Yeah, it's been really good. When you've got a completely full house, and the applause is ringing through the roof, and it's a truly great play. I think it's so much very much relevant to our times now. Especially, I won't go too deep into that because Putin and all that stuff. Horrendous as it is, there is a relevance which taps into this. So yeah, a play about Stalin is around the right thing to put on at the moment. I'm hoping it will have we're writing to bigger theatres and things like that to make it more of a, to get it a little bit pushed forward and give it more presence. Yeah.
And speaking of theatres, if there was one place you could take this, where would it be?
Well, it would be lovely, wouldn't it, in the West End, something like the Theatre Royal Haymarket or something like that, but I imagine something like the Pleasance would be nice for it to start, somewhere Pleasance would be very good for it. It might be an Edinburgh show, I don't know, but it's certainly got legs. I think it's got a cast of 6, so it's quite small. And there's really no set. I mean, the actual great thing is that you can't obviously build a dacha in the middle of, Stalin's dacha in the middle of the Gatehouse. It's just costly. But the way we do it with minimalism, I think, works very, very well indeed. You don't need to do much to make a story effective. And therefore, the costs are low. Very low.
And tell me a little bit more about people behind the scenes.
Well, the writer, Francis Beckett, wrote a very successful play before called Modest Little Man about Clement Attlee, who was the Labour Party, who was the Prime Minister just after the war, and he literally changed Britain completely with the National Health Service. He brought so much to it. He was one of the best Prime Ministers we'd ever had, but he wasn't big, he wasn't flamboyant, he was a modest little man, exactly what he was. Very mild-mannered person who was very honest and a decent man. And he was a wonderful Prime Minister, and it's a very successful play. And this is his second play after that, So, and I went to see the play, and I thought it was great. I really did. And so I thought, I'd love to work with Francis Beckett, and here I am working with him. He's a wonderful writer. Owain Rose, who directs it, was graduate of Manchester Metropolitan, which is the college that I wanted to go when it was Man Poly, because I always wanted to be in the same league as Steve Coogan and Rick Mail and all those people who came out of Manchester, because I've got a comedian's heart, I've got to make the world laugh type heart. I'm not your sort of stereotypical actor. I don't think I'm somebody who is sort of, my blood is comedy, definitely. Although Stalin is not funny, certainly not in this play. It's bloody terrifying. Hopefully.
And what have been the 3 things that you have learned from playing Stalin and doing this play?
I think you learn how to. I mean, one of the great things I learned through being a comedian and being a sketch comedian, how to control a room. I think one of the great advantages of doing comedy and being on your own and having to know whether a room is hot or cold or who's warm or who's hot is when you're playing a monster like Stalin, you have to dominate the players, completely dominate the players. They shouldn't hear a pin drop because he's just, You know, I have to make him as terrifying as possible. But I've got to like him as well. You can't just make him terrifying. You kind of have to understand the man, understand why he was the way he was. I mean, he was power crazed, full stop. You know, he was in absolute control. He wouldn't let anyone get in his way. And if you did, that was it, mate. Even a whisper or a word, you were gone. Yeah. So when you're playing someone like that, there's got to be complete domination.